Rory McIlroy called the PGA Tour's new second tier a glorified developmental circuit on the record at the US Open, and then spoke with Rolapp in a private phone call that lasted the better part of an hour. 4 days later, McIlroy issued a statement calling the same system a positive step for professional golf.
This is not about one player changing his mind. The PGA Tour just restructured how 230 professional golfers will compete, earn, and maintain their status starting in 2028. McIlroy's public criticism of that structure 1 week before the official announcement was the most damaging thing any player has said about the tour's new direction since the Live War. Then, Rolapp called him, and the criticism disappeared. Honestly, I think what happened between McIlroy's Shinnecock press conference and that official statement is the clearest illustration of how the PGA Tour manages dissent from its most valuable players, and Golf Digest described McIlroy's pattern of reversals as now legend for a reason.
Do you think McIlroy's reversal after the Rolapp phone call was genuine, or was he told to get in line? Drop it in the comments right now. And stay with me, because the third quote McIlroy gave at Shinnecock Hills is the one that actually matters most for the tour's future, and nobody covered it correctly, and I am not getting to it until we are deep into this video. To understand what McIlroy's Shinnecock press conference actually was, you need to understand who McIlroy had been for the tour in the 3 years before it.
During the Live War, McIlroy was the PGA Tour's most visible, most credible, and most public defender. He sat in press rooms and gave reporters the arguments the tour could not make through official channels. He called out the Saudi-backed league in ways that Monahan could not without creating legal risk. He absorbed the backlash from players who defected while maintaining his position that the tour was the right place to be.
He was the tour's good soldier. That was the phrase he used himself when it ended badly. He called himself a sacrificial lamb after being blindsided by the 2023 Framework Agreement announcement. He had been fighting for a version of the tour's future that was negotiated without his full knowledge, and he resigned from the policy board when he found out. That resignation was the first real signal that McIlroy's loyalty to the tour was conditional on the tour behaving honestly with him.
The second signal was at the Players' Championship in March 2026. Rolapp had briefed McIlroy by phone, a 1-hour call, about what he was going to announce. McIlroy described the call publicly. He just sort of took me through everything that he was going to say to you guys. He called the direction positive. That was March.
Here is the number that makes what happened in June so striking. Rolapp's Players' Championship presentation covered 6 broad themes from the Future Competitions Committee. McIlroy heard them in March, called them positive, and waited 3 months. Then, 1 week before the formal announcement, with the US Open as his platform and the golf world watching, he walked into a Shinnecock Hills press room and gave 3 quotes that individually undermine and collectively detonate everything Rolapp had been building. 3 quotes, 1 press conference, 1 week before the announcement.
The third quote is the one nobody fully explained, and it is the one that changes the entire story. Here are the 3 quotes. US Open at Shinnecock Hills, June 17, 2026, pre-tournament press conference. Quote 1. Track 2 is a glorified Korn Ferry event, like that's what Track 2 is going to be. Quote 2. You start to realize that the way the tour was before Live came along was actually pretty good. It was a pretty good structure and everything sort of worked pretty well.
Quote 3. The one most coverage buried. I play my schedule, and I'll continue to play my schedule, which is getting less and less as the years go on. 3 quotes, 1 press conference. You follow this tour. You watched McIlroy spend 3 years defending it. You watched him absorb shots from players who went to Live, watched him stay at the policy board longer than was comfortable, watched him serve as the face of a cause that was not entirely his own. And then at the US Open, with the Golf Channel recording, with reporters typing, he said the thing the tour's promotional structure is built on preventing. Their biggest star, in public, confirming that he plans to play less.
Getting less and less as the years go on. That sentence is the structural catastrophe buried in all the coverage of glorified Korn Ferry event. It is direct, personal, and specific. It is McIlroy telling the entire championship series concept, the premium schedule where elite players show up every week, that it is one player short of working. Because it does not work if Rory is not in it. The glorified Korn Ferry line drew the attention. The old tour was actually pretty good line drew the analysis.
But the getting less and less line is the one Rolapp had to neutralize before he could announce anything.
Here is what happened next. Rolapp called McIlroy. The call lasted the better part of an hour. Nobody at the table for that conversation was a journalist. What was said is not public. What came out of it is. 4 days after the Shinnecock press conference, McIlroy issued an official statement to Golf Channel. It said, "Today's announcement is a positive step for professional golf. As more details emerge, it is encouraging to see the PGA Tour reaffirming the importance of meritocracy and creating a structure that will serve both players and fans well into the future."
The man who said Track 2 was a glorified developmental tour was now calling the same announcement a positive step for professional golf. Here is the question that no outlet asked directly. What did Rolapp say in that hour-long call that moved McIlroy from glorified Korn Ferry event to positive step for professional golf in under 4 days? Was McIlroy pressured to reverse his position by the tour's leadership, or was the Rolapp call genuinely persuasive and McIlroy changed his mind honestly?
Golf Digest's analysis after McIlroy's pivot was blunt. They wrote that McIlroy's talking point pivots are now legend. They described a pattern, public criticism, private outreach, public reversal, that has repeated itself multiple times across McIlroy's relationship with tour leadership. And just when you think this pattern is purely about one player being managed by an institution, the specifics of McIlroy's relationship with Rolapp going back to their very first meeting reveals something that reframes how this reversal should be read.
Here is what the PGA Tour's player communication structure effectively promised players like McIlroy when Rolapp was appointed as the incoming CEO. The promise, made implicitly through the appointment process and explicitly through Rolapp's early meetings with players, this is different from what came before. Rolapp was an NFL executive. No preconceived golf ideas, no allegiance to existing power structures, no institutional inertia. He would listen before he decided. He would consult before he announced. Players who had felt blindsided under Monahan would have a genuine voice.
McIlroy believed that promise. He said so publicly in August 2025, after their first in-person meeting that lasted 90 minutes. I like him. I like him a lot. I like that he doesn't come from golf. I like that he doesn't have any preconceived ideas of what golf should look like or what the tour should look like. I think he's going to bring a fresh perspective to everything, and I think he wants to move pretty quick, so I'm excited. What McIlroy gave up based on that promise, the resignation from the policy board position that had cost him 3 years of personal capital and credibility. He stepped back from active governance, trusting that Rolapp's new model would function differently.
Put yourself in McIlroy's position in March 2026. Rolapp briefs you by phone for an hour about a structural overhaul that is going to be announced publicly 3 months later. He takes you through everything. You describe it as positive. You go back to your preparation for the Players' Championship. You trust the process. 3 months pass. The announcement week arrives. And what is actually being announced is a system where the Championship Series, the premium tier of events, has explicit expectations that elite players will be present. A system where being absent from Championship Series events affects your tier status and your eligibility for future events.
McIlroy said in the same week, "I play my schedule, which is getting less and less." He heard the March briefing. He called it positive. Then he read the fine print on the actual announcement. And what he found was a system that was going to make his stated intention to play less either impossible to honor or damaging to his status. The most relevant historical comparison is Arnold Palmer in 1966, when the PGA Tour and the PGA of America clashed over whether touring professionals should have autonomy over their own scheduling and commercial decisions.
Palmer was the tour's biggest name. He navigated that conflict quietly, mostly through back-channel negotiation, while publicly remaining a face of unified professionalism. The structural conflict was eventually resolved, but Palmer's behind-the-scenes work to protect player autonomy while maintaining public unity with the institution shaped how the tour handled player relations for the next 2 decades. McIlroy is in a version of that role now: public unity, private friction. And the moments where the private friction leaks into public forums, like Shinnecock Hills, are the clearest signals that the back-channel system is not fully resolving the tension.
Now here's the part nobody connected. Rolapp confirmed the phone call publicly. He said, "Yeah, I had a chance to speak with Rory today. We talked a bit about it, and I think he's made some comments publicly since then." That last phrase, "I think he's made some comments publicly since then," is the most carefully worded sentence Rolapp produced in the entire Travelers Championship press conference. He does not say McIlroy changed his mind. He does not say McIlroy agreed with him. He says McIlroy has made public comments since the call.
He is directing reporters to what McIlroy said after they spoke, without characterizing the content of their conversation or confirming that McIlroy was persuaded.
That phrasing is deliberate. An NFL executive who spent years in the most media-sophisticated major sports organization in America does not choose words accidentally in a press conference. He is not saying McIlroy agreed with him. He is saying McIlroy has spoken since they talked. The content and the motivation for that speech are left entirely to the audience to interpret. That is the most controlled possible answer to a question about whether the tour just managed its biggest star into line. And nobody in the press room followed up on that phrasing specifically.
Scheffler's public response to Rolapp's appointment and the two-tier announcement stood in sharp contrast to McIlroy's pattern. He said, "I think our board and Jay and everybody put a lot of research into finding his successor, and to be able to get somebody from the NFL, especially somebody high up at the NFL, I think is pretty cool. That is a player who either has no concerns about the two-tier system or has decided that the press room is not where those concerns belong." Either way, his public posture throughout the announcement week was consistent, measured, and supportive.
Compare what Scheffler said about Rolapp with what McIlroy said in August 2025 about the same person. I like him a lot. Same enthusiasm, different outcomes. McIlroy's initial enthusiasm collided with the actual policy details and produced a Shinnecock press conference. Scheffler's initial enthusiasm produced quiet, consistent public support through the announcement. The difference is not about Rolapp. It is about what each player needs from the tour structure and how those needs are being served.
Scheffler plays approximately 18 to 22 events per year. He competes in all 4 majors and most signature events. His schedule fits the championship series model without significant conflict. A system that rewards consistent elite-level participation does not threaten his calendar. McIlroy said his schedule is getting less and less. The championship series model creates structural incentives for exactly the participation level McIlroy is explicitly moving away from. His conflict with the new system is not philosophical, it is practical.
Is Scheffler's quiet, consistent support for the tour's direction smarter than McIlroy's public criticism followed by reversal? Or does McIlroy's approach actually accomplish more for players because it creates leverage? Comment, Scheffler's approach smarter or McIlroy's creates more leverage? The follow-up question, which Yahoo Sports raised in their analysis and which nobody in golf media has directly answered, is what actually happens in 2028 when the championship series launches and McIlroy's schedule is less and less rather than the full commitment the system is designed around.
Rolapp managed the June 2026 version of this conflict with a phone call. The 2028 version will require something more significant. The Open Championship at Royal Birkdale is days away. McIlroy goes there as the defending champion. He will be the anchor of the broadcast, the face of the tournament for most audiences outside the UK. He is, for one more week, the man the sport needs on Sunday.
Here is the counterintuitive number. Rolapp confirmed 47 events in the new system, the same as currently. But of those 47, the championship series will have roughly 23 to 24 events with explicit elite player attendance expectations. That means approximately half the tour schedule will carry participation incentives that are structurally incompatible with what McIlroy says he plans to do. Half the tour. And the man who was its biggest defender for 3 years is already telling you he will not be there for all of it.
Here is the question the tour has not answered and needs to answer before 2028. What is the actual mechanism for managing elite player attendance at championship series events? If the mechanism is financial incentive, how large does the incentive need to be to matter to a player with McIlroy's earnings profile? If the mechanism is tier status, what happens to the championship series product when a 4-time major champion decides his tier status is less important than his schedule preferences?
These are not hypothetical questions. McIlroy answered them in June at Shinnecock Hills in 3 sentences. Then he reversed on the surface after a phone call. But the underlying answers have not changed. Yahoo Sports said it plainly in their analysis. The biggest confrontation may be yet to come. Here is the pattern this McIlroy-Rolapp situation reveals about how the PGA Tour makes and manages its most consequential decisions.
The process is consistent and documented at this point. Rolapp identifies the key player voice that needs to be on board. He briefs that player privately before public announcements. The player's initial private response is positive because in the early briefing, the details are not yet locked in. Then the full plan is unveiled. The details create friction. The friction goes public. Rolapp calls. The public friction subsides. Golf Digest noted that McIlroy's pivots are now legend. That characterization is not praise and it is not insult. It is an observation about a documented behavioral pattern across multiple years, multiple policy debates, and multiple moments where McIlroy's public position was sharply different from his final public statement.
The pivot is not the problem. The pattern is the problem. When any organization's decision-making process consistently requires a private phone call with its most prominent voice to neutralize public criticism, and when that neutralization produces a reversal within 4 days every time it happens, the organization is not building consensus. It is managing dissent. Those are different things. Consensus is durable. Managed dissent resurfaces. The "getting less and less" quote from Shinnecock Hills is dissent that a phone call cannot manage. McIlroy said his schedule is reducing. He said it is going to keep reducing. A private call with Rolapp might produce a statement that the two-tier system is a positive step. It cannot produce a statement that McIlroy intends to play more.
You watched 3 years of this. You watched McIlroy be the tour's best argument during the Live War. You watched him resign from the policy board. You watched him endorse Rolapp with genuine enthusiasm. You watched him call Track 2 a glorified developmental circuit, and then issue a supportive press statement 4 days later. The cycle has been running long enough that you can predict the next iteration. Sometime between now and 2028, there will be another decision that conflicts with what McIlroy needs from his career. There will be another press conference where the truth comes out. There will be another phone call. There will be another statement.
What will not happen is a structural resolution of the underlying tension between what the PGA Tour's Championship Series needs McIlroy to do and what McIlroy intends to do with his career from here. That resolution would require the Tour to publicly acknowledge that its premium schedule model cannot mandate the attendance of players who are, as McIlroy says, playing less and less. And it would require McIlroy to stop issuing statements that paper over a genuine disagreement with a temporary ceasefire. Neither party has shown a willingness to do that. The cycle continues.
Is the Rolapp-McIlroy dynamic proof that the PGA Tour's governance model has genuinely improved under new leadership? Or is it the same managed dissent playbook under a different commissioner? Genuine improvement or same playbook? Here is where this lands. Rory McIlroy told a Shinnecock Hills press room that the PGA Tour's new second tier was a glorified Korn Ferry event. He said the old tour was actually pretty good before Live disrupted it. And he said his schedule is getting less and less as the years go on.
Then Brian Rolapp called him. They talked for an hour, and 4 days later, McIlroy called the same announcement, a positive step for professional golf. Golf Digest said McIlroy's pivots are now legend. That is accurate. It is also incomplete. The pivot matters less than what precipitated it. 3 specific quotes about 3 specific things: the quality of Track 2 events, the value of the pre-Live tour structure, and his own schedule intentions are on record from Shinnecock Hills. A reversal statement does not unsay those 3 things. It only creates the surface of institutional unity that the tour needs for the announcement to land cleanly. The 3 quotes are still there. McIlroy's schedule is still getting less and less. Track 2 is still whatever it is, and 2028 is still humming.
The Open at Royal Birkdale starts this week. McIlroy will be on the first tee as the defending champion, one of 2 or 3 players who make the broadcast worth watching. He is dealing exactly what the tour needs him to do this week. Whether he will keep doing it by 2028, or whether the confrontation Yahoo Sports predicted is already building, depends on what Rolapp offers in the negotiations nobody is having in public. Subscribe for the Birkdale Breakdown and every major institutional development as it happens, because the McIlroy-Rolapp dynamic is the defining governance story of professional golf right now, and it is not close to being resolved.